Actually, I went for my handover trip with Marcel in February 2016. Wow. So it's just over 4 years, and that was a very memorable trip. And I'm really hoping that we're going to be able to bring you a flavour of that by visiting Alsace, by visiting Severine at home today. That should be part of it, and I know we've got some lovely pictures to be able to do that. So thank you very much for joining us on this lovely evening. We had planned some events with Severine this autumn, which honestly at the moment look unlikely to happen. So what better than to have her invite us home. So let's join her and see what we're missing by not having her here in the autumn. Severine, welcome.
Thank you very much. Very nice to see you. I can't see all of you, but very nice to share this time with you today. It's a gorgeous, beautiful, sort of a summer day in Alsace. It's been really hot. And I'm happy to welcome you in a brand new tasting room behind me that has been open exactly 1 year ago. The grand opening was 1 year ago, and we are hoping to welcome most of you as soon as we can. We expect we should be open for tasting again in June, of course, with all the recommended sanitary conditions, but it's definitely, if you come along to Alsace, it's a place not to be missed. So I'm going to show you where it is. Yeah, here we are. So I'll do. Yeah, here we go.
Very expensive. The one.
So Alsace is the smallest wine region in France. It's very narrow and long. On the left of the map, you have the Vosges Mountain and the west, so Paris and Brittany. And on the right, you have Germany. So it's a very small region. Although it's a very small region, it's probably the only region in the world that offers such a diversity of white wine. So it's normally when you should find an Alsace wine you like, no matter what your taste is. We have dry wine, we have off-dry wine, we have sweeter wines. So we have a variety of taste in our white wine that I'm convinced that everybody can find a wine he likes. And I'm going to help you today make it a bit more clearer about this very large choice of wine that we offer. So this is a vineyard. It's the largest privately owned estate. It's, I forgot about miles, but it's more or less 800 kilometers of vine along. So we go literally from Alsace to Brittany on very, very steep slopes. As we have a sandy soil to maintain the erosion we have in the vineyard, we use walls, and we have 35 miles of stone walls with 2 masons, rather repairing the wall that fell or putting new walls in place when we replant a plot that has to be reorganized. So they spend their entire year making walls, which is quite impressive. The harvest done by hands, obviously. I often forgot to mention it because it sounds so obvious for me. We have 100 hectares on very steep slopes. So definitely even by hand, it can be challenging sometimes, but the machine wouldn't go through it. So the grapes are being picked. As an estate, being an estate means we don't buy fruit, we don't buy juice. Everything comes from our own production. So the key for an estate is to produce the best possible fruit. I can give McDonald's ingredients to a 3 Michelin star chef. Is not going to be able to do a lot. It's the same in the wine. The quality of the wine all depend in the fruit from the beginning. So we are extremely, that's where we spend most of the time in the vineyard, and we are extremely careful about the quality of the fruit. Now this picture is a root of a very old Gewürz. And as the vine age, it gets bigger and bigger. We have all kind of animals in the vineyard. Last year, we're starting to put sheep to cut the grass in the vineyard. They kind of really enjoy the place. I can tell it's a fabulous working place for them. We have dogs. We are dog lovers. So that's the last addition, a little puppy Pocket, who love the vineyard also. Now, the specificity of Schlumberger is more than half of the vineyard is under Grand Cru classification. Now, Grand Cru is a big word, not always easy to understand. A Grand Cru is basically a specific piece of land that you can see in different colors on this map. And due to the soil characteristic and the exposure and the historical behind this piece of land, we know we make higher quality wine. It's like in your garden, you know, where the best place where you can grow your tomatoes, where you can grow all kind of veg. So it's a very specific piece of land that has terroir characteristic. And those wines are quite amazing. They have a very long aging potential. And they are definitely wine that tells you a story. When you have them in your glass, you just don't have one zip. They stay and they come out and they come out. So it's really wine that keeps you company during your meal. The most impressive of a Grand Cru is for sure the Grand Cru Quiterlé, extremely steep, very low yields. You can't produce tons and tons of grapes on a terroir like this. And it has a volcanic soil. There is only 3 volcanic terroirs in Alsace. This is one of them. And the volcanic soil will bring an extra minerality to the wine. So the Riesling, for example, in the Quiterlé is really bone dry. It has this extremely strong mineral character. And it's a Grand Cru, I call it the teenager. It's the one that needs time to grow. So it's a wine when it's young, you're like, okay, it's a good wine, it's a good terroir wine, but it really shows off when it's more like an adult. And an adult for Quiterlé is 8-10 years. That's when it showed the best. The Kessler is my most feminine Grand Cru. It's a small basin, very protective from west wind, from northern wind in that case, from the cold. A winemaker says it's like being in the stomach of your mom. You're very in a protective area, and it makes extremely charming, elegant, kind of floral wines, which really I like. It has that touch of charm and elegance that is that belongs to women. Let's be fair. The Severine is the diplomat. We only make Riesling on the Grand Cru Severine. It has limestone soil, and it's the wine that really opens the door. If you're just starting with Alsace, trying Riesling, which is dry, it's always a good way to start. And this wine, you can put it on the table of 10 guests that are not familiar with wine. I can absolutely guarantee everybody's going to like it. It's a win and win. It has also a still fairly reasonable price, because the idea is the Riesling Severine is used to introduce people into Grand Cru of Alsace. And it's a wine you can easily share with lots of people who never tried Alsace. When the Quiterlé is a step right after Severine is when you're a bit more familiar with the wines. And the Spiegel, the smallest of our Grand Cru, where we only make Pinot Gris. And it's also a good way to start. I mean, Spiegel and Severine are 2 Grand Cru used to open the doors. The wines, the fascinating things about the wine from Domaines Schlumberger is that you can rely on what I'm saying. It's hard to believe, but they are all made the same way in the cellar. There is no difference between making a Pinot Blanc and making a late harvest. So the only difference of those wines are the terroir and the grapes and the day we pick them, which is absolutely crucial. So all our wines are fermenting in oak cask. We don't stop the fermentation. So the sugar that is left is what it meant to be left. Those casks are more than 100 years old because we don't want any oak taste in the wines. We believe they are quite aromatic, so we avoid oak into our wines. They have a temperature control. So that's where the next vintage will start its life, into this oak cask. Then they're gonna stay, when the wine has finished its fermentation, they're gonna stay in this oak cask for 6-8 months on fine lees until basically June and July. To get basically staying on fine lees for this, leaving the wine in the same containment and in the same place for that long, give it complexity and structure. The one thing wine doesn't like its entire life is to be moved. When you have an old bottle and you ask me if it's still drinkable, my first question to you will be, how many times did you move? Moving the wine damage it more than your cellar condition. So at Schlumberger, once the grapes get at the cellar, we take an enormous time. We are very patient in moving the wine in a very slow process. So after all those months in oak cask, when the wine is totally finished, it comes into the stainless steel tanks. They can stay, let's say the Prince Abbé, the classic range of a wine, is bottled 1 year after its production. The Grand Cru, late harvest, are bottled 18 months to 2 years after its production. It seems to be a long time, but I'm absolutely convinced that this long time we take for the production is a guarantee on the aging potential of a wine. This is a brand new tasting room, which I hope you'll be able to join one of those days. As I said, we have several offers on visit. All of them are quite memorable. The most impressive one is a tour in the 4x4, a tour of the vineyard for an hour, and Joe has done it. And if you don't have vertigo, you'll be all right. It's really something to remember. So if you are wine lovers, it's really something not to be missed. And that's the inside behind me of that great new tasting room. And if you do the 4x4 tour, you finish the tasting in a family tasting room, which is this one, which is in our garden. And that's the first cellar of my ancestor Nicolas in 1810. So Domaines Schlumberger is just a little bit older than the Wine Society, to be honest, not that much. And that's the tour with Marcel Joe has done. She survived it, so everyone can survive this tour. Great. So a very little explanation on the wines. As I told you, there is a large choice in Alsace. 3 main grapes. The first grape is the Riesling. This is a Riesling Grand Cru 17, which is available at Wine Society, I guess, the current vintage at the Wine Society. Now, the Riesling is a grape that acts like an apple. You have an apple 1 week in your kitchen. No matter when you eat your apple, it always has acidity. So when you look for dry white wine in Alsace, you will pick Riesling. That's the dry white wine for food. No matter the food you have, you request a dry white wine, like you will pick Sancerre, Chardonnay in other regions. In Alsace, you pick Riesling. And it's a great wine for food. The Pinot Gris is my favorite grape. It's the glass I have right now because it's the signature of Alsace. This is a grape originally from Alsace, and that the style of Alsace is very unique. Our classic Pinot Gris, Les Princes Abbés, is more on the dry side. So basically the Pinot Gris is like a peach. You buy your peach on Monday, it's hard and firm. As the days goes, the peach becomes sweeter and softer. And this is why there is a big difference between the classic Pinot Gris and the Grand Cru Pinot Gris. The classic Pinot Gris is a peach you will eat Tuesday, Wednesday. It has a bit of fruit, but it's still dry. It's not that sweet. The Pinot Gris Grand Cru is a peach that you will eat by Friday or Saturday when the fruit gains sugar. So the Pinot Gris Grand Cru is obviously much sweeter than the classic. And funnily enough, the line in our range of dry and sweet wine is in between those two. With the Pinot Gris Classique, you still have a dry wine that you can accommodate any food you like. In fact, Pinot Gris loves white meat, pork, veal. It's a great autumn wine with mushroom, creamy dishes, pumpkins. Pinot Gris Princes Abbés is the only wine you can pair with soup. Trust me, I've tried several times and it works. The Grand Cru is absolutely not as flexible. The Grand Cru Pinot Gris is for cheese tray, pork with a honey sauce with spice. If you like Thai spice food, Pinot Gris Grand Cru is ideal. My favorite match with Pinot Gris, I use it more from September to March because it's richer. And I do foie gras or game salad as a starter. And I use it again with my cheese tray at the end of the meal. So you can use it 2 times of the meal if you're just 4 of you. It's a great way not to open and to mix too many wine during the same meal. And the Gewürz, which has made the reputation of Alsace, it's the exotic fruit. It's blooming in terms of flavors, much sweeter. Yes, for sure, it has the sugar. The key with Gewürz is the balance. You have sweetness, but you have a very strong, long finish to keep it clean. So it doesn't left your mouth full of sugar. And definitely Gewürz is more appropriate with Asian food or dessert. It is used by the French a lot as an aperitif wine also, but more for the winter time when you like richer wines. So I would say that half of a category is on the dry and half of the category is more on the sweet wines. And a lot of people say, oh, we're not sure about Alsace. We don't know what to drink Alsace because they're not sure what they're going to get. You have to remember that Alsace wine, half of the category are what I call easy player. So a Pinot Blanc, a Riesling, an entry-level classic Pinot Gris, those are very easy wine to pour, no matter what the occasion, any food, any aperitif. In fact, those are the 3 wines I'm more likely to have in my fridge for the just-in-case situation. Someone comes along and it wasn't planned, then I've got one of the 3 wines in my fridge that you really can open anytime. Then we have the rest of the category with the Pinot Gris Grand Cru, Gewürz Grand Cru, late harvest, which are more event wines for special occasion, for a special dish. And when I have to use those wines, basically I choose the wine first and I choose the food afterwards, depending on the wines. So it's a place where you choose the wine first and the food after. And we have that, my favorite bottles of all. It's absolutely beautiful. You can make a bedside lamp with it after you drink it. I haven't done that myself, to be honest. It's a Riesling Magnums. It's 14. So no, as you may know, Grand Cru, the older they are, the more terroir you're going to get. If you drink a young Riesling Grand Cru, you have Riesling in your glass. If you drink an older Riesling Grand Cru, the terroir take all the space in the bottle, and then you really taste the terroir more than the grape. Now, people are sometimes a bit afraid of the side of the bottle. No, this is just the magnum. If you have 6 or 8 people around your table, you know you're going to open 2 bottles anyway. So why don't you show a magnum? I can absolutely guarantee you that the effect that you're going to have on people bringing such a wonderful bottle on the table is absolutely guaranteed. It's quite impressive. And I'm exactly like you. When I have 6 or 8 guests in my house, I don't have room in the fridge. So typical. A way to make this bottle cold, you use your cleaning bucket that you fill up with ice and water. You put the magnums in for like 40-45 minutes, nicely chilled, and you put it on the table. It doesn't need to be ice cold. So this is my little tips with those bottles. And when people look at the magnum, they really feel like, oh, wow, that's a fabulous bottle. So all those wines are available at the Wine Society, and it's a pick and choose Alsace. So you just have to decide, what do you like? Do you like dry wine? Do you like off-dry wine? Do you like sweeter wine? If you've never tried Alsace, start with the classic Pinot Gris, which is my favorite, Pinot Gris Prince Abbé. Then you will see. If you like drier, you move to Riesling and Pinot Blanc. If you like sweeter wines, you can move to Grand Cru, Pinot Gris, Gewürz, and late harvest. Cheers. So I don't know if anyone has a question.
So Severine, there's been a few questions that have come in, but I think Joe wants to say something first. Sorry, Joe, I interrupted you.
Just a couple of things. Thank you so much. I love that walk through the grape varieties. That I found that really helpful, and I will probably pinch it when I'm trying to talk about grapes to people, because I think sometimes, particularly with Alsace, it is complex, and it is challenging to know what to expect, when to serve wines. So I think that was a huge help. You mentioned the Prince Abbé a couple of times. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about that, partly also because we have the new label. We've just started with the new label.
Absolutely.
Which is looking very pretty.
So the Prince Abbé range is an historical name we gave to our classic AOC because the middle-aged Les Prince Abbé was running the vineyard for like 1,000 years, so they pay respect. And literally it's grape that are non-Grand Cru, but as we have a lot of Grand Cru land, to make sure that the terroir is going to reflect into your glass when you buy a Grand Cru, we wait that the plant is minimum 15 years of age to use Grand Cru grapes into Grand Cru wines. So between 4 and 15 years, Grand Cru grapes are going into the Prince Abbé range, the entry level. So we make sure that the plant go deep enough in the ground and really show the terroir characteristic. A lot of you might be doing some gardening, like I've been doing a lot since we had lockdown. You know that the deepest your roots are, the most quality and the better fruit you're going to get in your garden. It's exactly the same with wine. So we get the plant really deep in the ground. So the Prince Abbé range has every single vintage 30% Grand Cru in it. So in that way, we can guarantee you the consistency in the quality of this Prince Abbé range. If you like 17, I can guarantee you're gonna like 18, 19, 20. And Joe, you might have noticed that all of vintage of Prince Abbé, although you have vintage affect, like they're a bit drier, they're a bit rounder, but the style is kind of book style, like it remained the same over the years. And this is also how we've been in this business in the family for 210 years. It's for a reason. And someone was asking me, oh, why do you do so much tradition and you are not more fashionable? Because by the time I'm ready for the fashion is something else. And there is a good thing about being traditional. It's also guarantee you sustainability in times.
Mm.
And I am sure that the Wine Society is a company that understands that better than any others in this business. It's also because when we've been here long, we are doing traditional product that are produced traditionally, and there is no way we want to change that. It helps us giving the guarantee of the quality in our bottles, and people knows that if my name is on those bottles and my brother's name is on this bottle, they can rely on the quality. The biggest example I have, in 2016, we had an enormous crop in volumes. Unfortunately, we didn't get the ripeness of the fruit of Rieslings. So we didn't make any Riesling Grand Cru. And it's a shame because it's our best sellers and we really need Riesling, but we didn't make any Riesling Grand Cru. All the Riesling Grand Cru went into the Prince Abbé range because the Riesling Grand Cru, it's not that they were undrinkable, they were just very light. And I didn't want to come to you, Joe, and say, you know, it's a bit light, but it's because of the vintage. So at Schlumberger, you moved from Riesling Grand Cru 15 directly to 17, which it's a bit young, but we skip a vintage, that this is the reason. But the Riesling Prince Abbé 16 is to die for. It has all the Grand Cru in it. So it's a baby Grand Cru. But that's the quantity of effort we are prepared to make to guarantee the quality. For me, the luxury of a wine grower is not to drive a Ferrari or to wear Chanel. It's to be able to skip a vintage if you don't have the quality you expect. And we can only do that because we're family owned. As long as you put financial people in the picture, it's all ruined. So yes, we are facing a difficult time. Yes, it's been locked down and so on, but I'm very confident in the product we offer, the value for money you get. I like to talk about pleasure for money than value for money. And we have an amazing team that hasn't stopped working in the vineyard during all those weeks. And so I'm very confident about the reliability in a long-term basis of a company like ours.
That's very good to hear.
Positive spirit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And could you say something very briefly as well about the 2017 vintage? Because although we were offering a range of the wonderful 2010s, which Marcel came back and rebought, I think,
yeah,
we only now have the Gewürztraminer 2010 left. Otherwise, we made available on the website the 2017s, which we had bought for keeping, but we thought we ought to at least make them available in case anyone wanted to try them. So the style of the 17, the quality of the 17, I think it was a smaller vintage, wasn't it?
It was an extremely tiny, small vintage, and you know, small is beautiful. So much, so it's so typical. So it was a small crop, but a quality that was just it's a weird story. We had the same situation with this 2007. We had to download Grand Cru into Prince Abbé just in order to have enough volume of Prince Abbé. It's not like all the wines could be Grand Cru. Mm-hmm. But we had to download some of it into the Prince Abbé to make sure we had enough volume of Prince Abbé to sell. So definitely a fabulous vintage. It's more a cold year, so it's wines that have more acidity. There is a bit of a jump between 15 and 17 on Riesling, because 15 was a sunny year, so a bit rounder in style. 17 is bone dry. They have 0.4 grams of sugar, but a beautiful vintage. And you're very lucky, and Wine Society customers actually extremely lucky still to have some 10, especially Gewürz Grand Cru, because what happened by aging is the alcohol eats the sugar. So the sugar perception that is very strong on a Gewürz Grand Cru when the wine is young is disappearing over the year. So a 10 years old Gewürz Grand Cru, it's just to die for. I mean, the balance must be outstanding. And I wish I still had some to sell at the winery, but it's all gone. So if you have a chance to grab it, do not hesitate. I really can guarantee the wine must be exceptional.
I'm going to hand over to Emma for questions in just 1 second, but I went over to Stevenage today to collect a bottle of the Prince Abbé so that I could taste that with you. But I also found in the tasting room, we're going on a rota basis, I found in the tasting room the bottle of the Grand Cru Gewürz 2010, which I'd originally opened using a Coravin.
Yeah.
When I was writing the notes for what was to be the fine wine list for the 2010 re-release, and we opened them all with Coravin so that more people could taste the wines. And sometimes Coravin works well. I've found not always so well on more mature wines, but this wine, I don't know if you can see it here.
Yeah,
on the bottle, I put a mark here to say this is what the level was with the Coravin. Obviously now I've opened it this evening, and the wine is still fresh, and it's got a really lovely citrus character. There's a real delicacy to it. I notice it's only 12% alcohol, which is quite unusual for Gewürz. But it's a beautifully silky, delicate wine. And I know exactly what you mean. There's a sweetness and charm there, but it's not overly sweet. There's nothing heavy or cloying about the wine. It's absolutely beautiful.
Those wines are what I call the cozy wine. It's for your Sunday night movie or when you read a good book.
Okay, that sounds good. Emma, you must have lots of questions, I'm sure.
We do. They're coming in thick and fast, actually. So if we could start with Sarah Dye, who's got a question. Hopefully she's been unmuted.
I have indeed. It's a novice question, I'm afraid. I had a conversation with somebody socially distanced about oak barrels, and we were talking about the difference between French and American oak and whether you can actually taste the difference. I'd like to get your thoughts on whether that is tasteable, Severine.
To be honest, I'm not very familiar with American oak in terms of winemaking. Like, I haven't been tasting wine during the process of winemaking in American oak. We personally use French oak, obviously, especially because we have the Vosges Mountain next to us, which is a big business for trees and oak. So I will say we have everything. We are a company that always work locally from always, like it's not the new things after the COVID, we always done that. So hard to tell. On the final wine, I feel personally that the French oak is more discreet, like you don't taste it, and that's the whole purpose. Like, you don't want the oak to be tasted. So that's, for me, it's more discreet, it's more integrate. That would be my main difference between the two, from considering what I've been tasting, basically. But Joe might know more about it.
Yeah, I would certainly add that unless the oak is very old, you will definitely get a more marked flavour from American oak than you will from French oak. And it's to do with the grain, how fine the grain of the oak is. And then the other thing is to do with how much the oak is toasted. So sometimes you find that American oak will be toasted more, and that brings out more of that vanilla character. So it's definitely something that you can perceive. It's worth looking out in tasting notes and things if you see it being mentioned, and then try and get a couple of bottles side by side to compare, and then I think you'll start to see that difference showing through.
Excellent. I think there was also a question, Severine, on serving temperatures for your different wines as well, from Sarah. So kind of, I think in Britain especially, we do have a habit of serving our wines too cold quite frequently, and the reds are always served too warm, apparently. So what would you kind of say roughly would be the good serving temperatures to bring the best out of your wines?
You're doing better in the UK, but I remember a time where I had to come an hour previous to tasting to pull out the bottle out of the ice. Basically, when the ice cold, you kill the flavors. So you can drink, you need to drink bad wine on a high score temperature that That's the only way, basically. But a good wine is always better too warm than too cold. So to be honest, for me, it's fridge temperature until I need the wine. Then I pull it out of the fridge and I leave the bottle on the table. But when I'm in a restaurant, I never keep my bottle of wine in an ice bucket during the whole meal. If it's on ice bucket, when I get there, after a little bit of time, I pull it out of the ice and then I leave it on the table, because the first glass is going to be cooler, which is refreshing. And as your meal goes, the wine is warming up a little bit, but then it will show more its characteristic. It's like how to drink the wine. You can always drink a bad wine in a plastic cup, but a bad wine in a crystal will be a bad wine. So rather too warm than too cold for me.
Perfect. So we've got a couple of questions that have also come in from Jan. Is Jan there? Excellent. If you'd like to ask your questions.
Bonsoir, Madame Schlumberger.
Bonsoir.
Salut d'Amsterdam.
Lovely.
Je vous remercie pour une excellente présentation au vin d'Alsace. My question is about alcohol content in the Rieslings. And I noticed when I was looking through your range earlier on that the young Rieslings always seem to have alcohol content of around 14%. And as the Grand Crus get older, the alcohol seems to decrease. Is that something that has happened over age, or is that something that for other reasons?
You are quite right. It's well pictured. There is two things. As I was mentioning, as the wine ages, the alcohol eats the sugar. So the alcohol perception seems to be lower. Now, the new challenge we have in the region is the warming temperatures. It became extremely challenging to produce, especially Rieslings. It's not so damaging on Pinot Gris and Gewürz, but Riesling are suffering a lot of those heat wave in the summer. So in order to keep the wine dry, we have been hiring a little bit the alcohol level. So our maximum used to be 13.5. We have been up to 14. And I'm doing the tech sheet of the vineyard, and each time I see 14.5, I run to the winemaker and say, stop, this is wrong. We know people don't want to drink wine that have too much alcohol. We are totally aware of that, and ourselves, we are the same. But in order to keep it dry, sometimes you have to higher the alcohol a little bit. This is something we are working on year after year. Unfortunately for us, we have only one chance per year to try what works and what doesn't. So we are working on it in terms of picking the grapes in all different levels, but we haven't found the magical answer yet. So yes, the wines are about 14 degrees alcohol. Honestly, we try a maximum not to go higher than this. But when you taste the wine, you don't really feel that percentage of alcohol, because you can say that the wine needs it, and in this way it's well balanced and doesn't feel too much alcohol. But that's definitely a concern in the region.
Excellent, thank you very much. So the next question is from Dave, who'd like to ask you.
Hello.
Hello, Dave.
You want to ask your question?
It's Paul. It's not Dave.
Oh, it's Paul.
We lost him.
I think we might have lost him. In which case, should we pass over to Mike then? Mike Bullitt had a question about food and wine matching.
Good evening, Severine, and I really enjoyed this evening's presentation. Thank you very much. I was interested what you said about the food and wine combinations, and one of the on Gewürztraminer, and one of the things which I find works nicely is smoked fish and Gewürztraminer, particularly with smoked salmon. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Yes, it's funny. I've heard a lot about smoked salmon with gewürz in the UK. And I also heard a lot about gewürz with oysters in Paris. So it's very funny how places have their habits. I wish we would eat as much smoked salmon as you do in the UK, but we don't have any sea nearby. So maybe I'm not so used to that. So for me, smoked salmon will be more Pinot Gris, which is not that sweet. But again, I've heard that the combination works extremely well. And I believe that it really depends on everybody's palate and habits. I also assume that maybe there is a generation thing in the youngest being very much onto dry wine because they haven't been, well, there is a beauty about getting older is that you get experience. Had a chance to experience so many wines and so many difference that you have a better knowledge about it. I will say the youngsters probably will prefer a drier wine with smoked salmon, but it's all about what you like and what you prefer. So this is why my recommendation was with the drier wines, because if you don't know what your guests like, it's safer. But I'm the first one to encourage as much as I can to be experimental with wines. What I do with my friends when we go out, I was tired of Severine, you pick the wine. Now we order each, like 3 or 4 of us, order a bottle of wine before we order the food. And then we try. We try rosé, we try red, we try white, whatever we fancy with the food that we have. That's the only way to know what you like, what you don't like, what works, what doesn't work.
Excellent. So there have been a few people who've been asking if you can talk a little bit more about the role of vendange tardive in sweet Alsace wine production, if you're feeling up to that.
Definitely. Late harvest, vendange tardive, are basically grapes. I was telling you about the peach that you eat at the end of the week. Well, those are grapes that you eat at the end of the month. So you leave the grapes out much longer, and they are full of sugar. They look sometimes nearly like dry resin. So they are over concentrated. We have a very, very slow pressing process to extract some juice. So now you forgot about quantities and volumes. It's all about fragile grapes that you're bringing. It's a bit of a bargain, because if you have a bigger rain, like it happened in the past, your grapes are fragile, so they kind of fell on the floor. So you never know if you manage to do late harvest or not. And I stopped answering journalists who ask me in August, are you going to make late harvest this year? I mean, you don't know until the end. It makes really sweet wines. We call that richness without heaviness. They have a lot of sugar, but they have a strong mineral balance that keep them drinkable. It's not full of sugar. I wouldn't recommend those wines for diabetics, that's for sure. But they are well balanced, and that's the category I was naming cozy wine. It's personally, I use them more after dinner as an aperitif. I feel they are too strong, and it kind of damage your palate for your meal afterwards. I drink them after dinner. I'm not a big fan of spirits, I have to admit. So if I have to finish the night with a glass of wine, that's what I would pick. And if you have girlfriends, it's even better. Like, you just enjoy your chatting after dinner with a good glass of wine.
Sounds like heaven.
We've been talking lots about it.
So Clive Gristwood had a question. Hi Clive, do you have your question? Right, okay, so Clive was asking, will this year's harvest be hindered by the COVID crisis due to a labour shortage? Because you did talk about how everything's hand-picked. So are you able to get the pickers in?
End of October, please. I have no idea. We had 2 days ago that conversation with my brother. I'm the one saying we should get organized as a woman, we should be prepared. And it's kind of, oh, we'll wait and see. And I'm like, if you wait and see, it's going to be too late. So we are questioning ourselves. Do we need more truck? How are we going to handle? Luckily for us, most of our pickers are local people. We don't get people from other countries, and it's really a lot of local. And we have people who comes every year, so they're reliable. The challenge will be, how do we bring them into the vineyard every day? We already have 2 teams that has an hour difference. We don't know. We already mentioned with my brother that if we are in the catastrophe situation, we bring what we can. But to be honest, it's God knows.
So it's a case of wait and see, really.
Yeah.
And somebody was asking, I think it is a case of wait and see, because somebody was asking about costs, but again, you just won't know, will you, until
the only thing
further down the line.
Yeah, no, the only thing I know after 20 years in the family business is we are among the best people to do DIY. Because when you don't have money, you have ideas, and we are extremely good at DIY. So I'm quite optimistic about it.
You'll be fine. It'll all be good. So the next question comes from Nick Cooper, and it's about Pinot Noir. Is Nick there at all?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Good evening, Severine.
Good evening.
Yes. I have a question about Pinot Noir. I don't know if you actually talked about that earlier on, but it's you do produce Pinot Noir, I believe, and the style of Pinot Noir over the years has altered, hasn't it? So I just wanted you to talk about your feelings about Pinot Noir now that we have global warming, and has the style changed over the last decade?
Yes, it's a very good question, because I forgot to mention Pinot Noir. This is the only red that Alsace does. And Pinot Noir is the grape that has the most improved over the last decade in Alsace. They all growers, I believe that you need a bit more technique making a red than a white. Most growers have been investing into producing better Pinot Noir, as we did. It's very funny, because I started in 01, and I said to the winemaker, there is 2 wines I'm not going to sell. It's Pinot Noir and Sylvaner, because I don't like them. And he came to me in 2007 with a Sylvaner, and he was like, try this. And I said, that's pretty good, although I'm not really a big fan of the grape. And the Pinot Noir, my brother joined in 2010, and he made it a priority to improve it. So for long, we kept it into the French market, because we didn't produce much of it. And recently we start to export our Pinot Noir a bit more. We have some vine that have 12 years of age that are coming into production. So we have a bit more quantities. And I kind of enjoy selling it now, because it's much better than what it used to be. Pinot Noir is the red. It's very comparable to a Sancerre red. It's more red for the summer. When you do grilled food on your barbecue, when you do salads and quiche, it's more a red for the summer. And consumers like to drink red wine that are not as heavy as they used to be. They can be in some region as well. Like Argentina, we used to have this very heavy red. So we feel that there is more and more demand into Pinot Noir. And I have to say, they are much better than what they used to be.
Fantastic. So another one that's come in is saying, do you engage a lot with other producers and kind of discuss trends and dynamics of the markets? I know, think you do catch up with a lot of the producers when you come to our growers tastings, don't you, once a year? But apart from that, in kind of around November in Q4, are there any other times where you all just catch up?
Yes, in fact, I'm the president of an association we created in 2016 with 19 top growers of Alsace. It's called Alsace Cru Terroir. And our aim, all of us are well known. Tindenbrecht, Weinbach, Albermann, Trimbach. I mean, you can see the list on the internet, but it's all well known winery of Alsace. And we decided to share a fame in a fame, like, because our wineries are known, for the benefit of the region. So we decided the association doesn't have it's not involved in politics, in big selling purpose. It's more about the image of Alsace and sharing the fact that we do beautiful wine in Alsace that are very often underrated and underknown. So we are sticking together to do that. And in Alsace, have you looked at the size of a region? We are not competitors. We are partners. We know that if there is one day a real demand into Alsace wines, we won't be able to provide wine for everybody. So there is no way for us to work against each other. We work very much together as a big family, and I think everyone has his place. You need supermarket wine, you need top wine, you need in-between wines. So I think there is room for everybody. So it's quite a friendly region, I have to say.
It's a very beautiful region as well. Which brings me on to a question. In terms of visits, you've got that beautiful tasting room behind you. So you are very much geared and open to the public, aren't you? People can come and pay you a visit.
Yeah, this is what you guys call the cherry on the cake. We spent 20 years refurbishing the cellar, the logistic. All we needed as priority was the production of the wine. I always say the priority was to have a good product. If you have a beautiful window and a bad product, it doesn't make sense. So the cherry on the cake is behind me, is this tasting room that we finished last year to be able to offer a better condition for visitors. And now it feels it's a place that you really feel well, and we like to offer a souvenir and not just a tasting. It's about you experiment Schlumberger, you're not tasting Schlumberger.
That sounds amazing. Absolutely amazing. Okay, so I think our final question comes from Peter Cousins. Is Peter there at all?
Hello?
Hello,
Yes,
would you like to ask your question?
Okay, yes. Having lived just across the border in Basel for a while, I know I used to drive into Alsace and buy wines very frequently, so I know Alsace wines, and it always struck me that Alsace Riesling Alsace wines in general had a different characteristic from German wines, which were geographically really quite close. And I wondered whether the difference was in the terroir, or whether that was in winemaking methods, or why there is that subtle difference between Alsace and German wines that are close together.
Actually, both. The terroir plays a role, of course, and the winemaking as well. I assume for long, the German wanted to have sweeter Rieslings because it was their habits, their style, what they like to drink. Having said that, the next generation of wine drinkers is asking for drier wines. And we know that for a fact that, the coming consumer generation will ask for dry wine. Excuse me. Therefore, the Germans started to make dry wine as well. And I guess that the picking, they were probably picking a little bit later than we are used to. So you have a bit more residual sugar in the grapes. So I guess that's the biggest difference. But they are picking earlier and earlier their Riesling in order to make dry Riesling. What I like about the Alsace style of Riesling is I remember going to the US and people say, oh, I don't drink Riesling, I don't drink sweet wine. So I was like, so you have the so-called New World, like Australian, New Zealand Riesling that can be, I've tasted most of them that were over acidic, like I didn't need to see my dentist for 6 months. And then you have the German that were sweeter. Riesling is kind of in between. It has aromatics, but it has minerality. So if you're not sure about Riesling, jump into Alsace, because we are just in the middle of what the Riesling style can be. And I forgot to mention, but more and more producers are putting this little line behind the bottle to tell you how dry or how sweet the wine is. So it's a good indicator.
Severine, thank you for mentioning that. That was one thing I meant to ask you to comment on. So that was very useful. Yes. I'm conscious that we are running close to the end of our time. It's gone so fast. So I just wanted to try and wrap up with a couple of comments. I think for me as a buyer, it is the biggest challenge coming to see you is that the consistency, the standard is just so good. You know, you're a very big estate, lot of vineyards. You're very unusual in Alsace among most of the big names, many of the big names. You are one of few not to buy in grapes. It's all about your own fruit. And I think one sees that in the quality and consistency of the wine. So, you know, congratulations for that. It's always a pleasure to come and taste. Thank you for the tip about how to chill a Magnum. Often here in the UK, you just put it outside the back door, and that can work too if it's wintertime. And in terms of going to visit, I can thoroughly recommend the bumpy ride through the vineyard, although I have to say it was, as you saw in the photo, it was Marcel that went into the back of the truck, not me. I had the luxury of being in the front. But honestly, do go if you can. And the beauty of where Schlumberger is based, right at the south of the region, is that it's really very close. How long does it take you from Basel Airport? It's
35 minutes, 35 minutes door to door.
So it's a very easy ride from Basel Mulhouse Airport. So when we can all fly again and visit again, please put it on your calendars. But the other thing is, and as I expect you will have seen from today's talk, just as soon as we can, we would love to have you back and do tastings for us here in person. It would be an absolute pleasure if you would please come.
Yes,
thank you so much for today.
Well, thank you very much to all of you for this time. It happens to be my birthday today, and I didn't expect to have so many guests for my birthday. Wine is about sharing, and I'm really, really happy I shared this moment with you. And I will, as soon as I can go in a plane, I'll be back. Thank you very much.
We will look forward to it. Thank you.